All righty. Good morning, guys. Sorry we had to kick it back about 5 or 10 minutes. We were getting some stuff ready for the show. Um, we were speaking earlier about how we're going to kind of get into the show today. We've got Mr. James, who has been a prior guest, maybe two times. Again, I've forgotten because we've covered so much. But I've got his latest appearance as well as the book we're going to be speaking about today, Mission Iran, which covers DET A's work and build up to their possible work with the infiltration into Tehran to get the hostages back, as well as a secondary mission. When the initial mission failed, they were lining up already. So we're going to get into a lot of great information, both on DET A and the Operation Eagle Claw as a whole. So questions are welcome today, but we're going to kind of let, excuse me, we're going to let Mr. James kind of talk about what got him started in the book writing process after his great overall history of DET A through the years, and the hoops he had to jump through with the Pentagon to get this book out. And you got to get the book because he put heart and soul into this bad boy, and it is an absolute page turner. So without further ado, before I bore everyone to death, Mr. James, I hope you're having a good morning, and we're glad to have you, and the floor is yours, sir.
Well, I'm happy to be here, Bud. Happy that you asked me to come back. I'm happy to try to address this issue or to talk about it. As we already discussed, it's we're gonna try to pick it up in the middle of the scene. I think it's almost 40 years since this has happened. Is that right? 40? 1980? No, 1979. Yeah, it's been a while. Anyway, um, a lot of you know that I have written the history of special forces in Berlin, which was up until the book came out, classified history. Um, as Bud mentioned, we went through some hoops to get that through the pre-publication process, and part of that book covers the history of Detachment A, aka 39 Special Forces, and then its follow-on unit, the 410 Special Forces, which was known as Physical Security Support Element, covers the history from 1956 to 1990. That's the one. And I do cover Iran briefly in the first. Um, Subsequent to the publication of that book, I spent a lot more time talking to many of the principals. I was in the unit at the time. Many of the guys did not have or did not want their story to be told because they were still on active service, which I can understand, and I understood at the time. But since then, we've been able to put together even more information. And two of the principal people I talked to are Clem Lemke, who was the lead on the team that went into Tehran, and of course, Fred Arushi, who was with Dick Meadows. Unfortunately, Dick Meadows has passed on, and so is Scotty McEwen, who was the fourth member of that team. Luckily, I was very close to Scotty, and I spent a lot of time drinking beer and scotch with him and talking. Well, I was going to say a profane word there, but we told a lot of stories. Let's put it that way. So Mission Iran tells the story that really has not been told before. Everyone knows pretty much what happened at Desert One. The mission went forward and how it was aborted after the helicopters failed one after another. But the story of what happened beforehand, before Eagle Claw, and what happened after has not been told really well. So Mission Iran is that story about how Berlin, how Detachment A participated in the mission from the day the American embassy was taken over by quote unquote students up until the day that Ronald Reagan got inaugurated as president. So from beginning to end. So it goes from November 1979 all the way up to January 1981, and what the unit did. I tried to illustrate it with maps and stuff from the Pentagon and a lot of photos. And as Bud intimated, there was a bit of a kerfuffle at the Pentagon. Only took a year to get through the review process. So I was very happy, and so was my publisher. I was very happy to finally get it approved and so that we could get it out published. So that's the good news. Where do we go from here, Bud? What kind of questions do you have, really?
I mean, considering what you were just leaving off about not really covering the DET side of the lead up to the mission, training and such, you know, it's interesting, guys. Y'all are going to have to buy the book because it'll be giving away a lot. But he goes into a great deal of detail on the formation of the original Berlin Brigade, the 39th Special Forces Group. And it's, of course, I love hearing about the mission and all the high-tech, you know, Jason Bourne stuff going on. But the overall history of the formation of the DET is absolutely amazing. Can you kind of speak about, before we get into the training, could you kind of speak about, because we were speaking about the men who were serving SOG and otherwise, can you kind of speak about the men you were close to in the DET and those that were going to be on the mission with you? Maybe not mentioning names, of course, guys don't want their names out, but what kind of guys were in the DET at this time? Battle hardened, smart?
Well, we were really fortunate. I mean, the unit was not big. We were about 90 people total, not too many, and so it was six 11-man teams, and so that's 60, almost 70 operators, plus a headquarters element, and all the support people brought us up to about 90. Probably about half the unit was Vietnam veterans. There were a lot of LAJAC people that came from Eastern Europe. Quite a few Germans were in the unit who were not eligible to be LAJAC people, but a lot of them immigrated to the United States and became American soldiers. And then there were a lot of us that hadn't, that were pretty green, pretty green. We were still wet behind the gills or whatever it's called. I was one of them. I had, right about this time, I had a total of 5 years of service. I came in 1973. So I'd only spent about 5 years in the Army, and none of that was in Vietnam.
Wow, that's and that's a really interesting portion, especially for the detachment, is the LAJAC guys. And I mean, as you mentioned, a lot of Vietnam veterans, quite a few SOG men in the group, and one that I popped out that I didn't know for the longest time, Colonel Frank Jacks. Wasn't he a colonel by this time?
No, he had left the detachment before I got there, but he was there earlier. He was not there during this particular time. There were probably a total of 22 people that served in SOG, probably another 10 additional people that served in Vietnam, maybe more. And they added quite a bit to our training abilities, to our capabilities. So we had a lot of Vietnam vets that brought a lot with them, and then we had We had a number of other specialist people, people that had learned skills in the civilian world that were very important. We had several people that had trained with the British Special Air Service that brought certain skills into the house. And then you had a whole lot of young guys who were just basically young, dumb, and ready to go anywhere and do anything. So it was quite a group. The great thing about it is rank, of course, in special forces doesn't account for a great deal, especially when you're not close to the flagpole. And there was a really good exchange of information between the young and the old, and in both directions. A lot of people, had this vision of a master sergeant or a sergeant first class talking down to an E5 or an E4 sergeant or corporal specialist first class. But these guys, for the most part, were very accommodating, and they listened to people when they came up with ideas. Now, it might be a stupid idea, but they at least listened to it. It was a great training experience. We did everything basically assuming no one knew anything, and started from there and put it all together. So it was a great place to be, a great group to work with. And then once training and work was done, we went out and partied together. So
oh man, I can only imagine.
It was a great environment.
A bunch of young guys making good money, having fun. I can only imagine the nights y'all had in Germany, in the cities
I was
together.
pulling out a lot of money, but I think it was about $600 a month.
Oh gosh, well,
that was the old days.
Yeah. That's I mean, and speaking of the training, I mean, you had mentioned in the last podcast and in the last book, just the wide array of training. You've got scuba teams, you've got guys going to combative or evasive driving courses. Of course, always doing jumps to stay ready. The variety of shoot houses you guys were doing, working with SAS, I believe the GSG-9, some of the border units and such as that. And I mean, it got to a point, I don't know if it was during the training no, it was before. I mean, even before Mr. Charlie Beckwith had showed up and was trying to get some stuff to form Delta with off of what y'all were doing early on.
Yeah, Charlie Beckwith showed up 1978 or early 79 and observed our training, made copies of all our lesson plans, and took it back to the States. Another guy that showed up later, this was after I ran, was a guy by the name of Marchenko. SEAL Team 6 creator, founder. So our name got dragged through the mud quite a bit by those people. No, it was really good. We did not have to do any of the silly stuff like back in the States. We did not have details to run around the post. We were an independent unit that was not responsible to Berlin Brigade unless we got a speeding ticket from the MPs or something. And we had a lot of resources. We had ammunition, explosives, everything we need to get ready for the mission. And we could train in Berlin, and we could train outside of Berlin in West Germany or elsewhere in Europe. Did dive training in the Mediterranean, in the North Sea, Scotland, and of course we went to all the large training areas like Grafenwehr to do long gun training and explosives. We did some explosive training in Berlin, but because we were in the middle of the city, we were kind of restricted on how big our charges could be, so had to tone those down. Anyway, it was a great place to be for training and personnel.
Oh yeah. that with while we're doing the training, to kind of segue into the Iran portion here, with all the training that's going on, as you're mentioning, I mean, guys are picking up just, James Bond skills and CQB, all kinds of stuff. Where did when y'all finally do, and we'll jump back to what it's like when y'all find out y'all are going to be a part of it, but when y'all find out y'all are going to be a part of the raid, where does the training differ from normal DET A training that goes on, or is there a difference?
Well, what I mentioned a lot of the hard skills like shooting and demolitions training and stuff like that. We did training on communications and things like that. But our training was also geared for urban environments, civilian clothes. We had a number of training teams that came in from the United States that would impart what we called, or what is called tradecraft training, non-technical communications, surveillance techniques. These are all instructors from that agency that everybody knows that sits in a place called Langley. And they would come over about twice a year, and we would run training exercises with training and exercises with them. So a lot of that kind of stuff. How that changed when we were alerted for the mission was almost all. We probably went from 60% urban training and 40% trade or fieldcraft type training to almost probably 80% hard skill fieldcraft, and it was getting ready for a direct action mission. Later on, about the middle of 1979, when we were getting ready for actually the second operation called Stormcloud, one of our guys came back from the ammo dump, having picked up our weekly allotment of ammunition, and mentioned that he had talked to the ammunition officer up there. And the guy was curious. He wanted to know what we were up to. And the guy didn't tell him, but he knew what was happening. And then he goes, you guys, your small unit has used up more ammunition so far this year than the entire Berlin Brigade, their normal allotment. The entire Berlin Brigade is about 6,000 troops. So you can imagine how much ammo that was. And we were going through it on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, everything from 40 millimeter ammo for the M79, M72 laws, of course, explosives, grenades, and then a lot of 7.62 and 9 millimeter and 5.56. So just burning through a lot of ammo.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like what they say about the SEALs, using more ammo than the entire Marine Corps put together and all of that. That's a ridiculous amount. I can't imagine how much lead y'all are putting down range with that. That's crazy. There was and I'm looking here, was the an interesting one. I think you might have actually mentioned a little bit of it in the overall history of DET A, but the Red Sails training op, or FTX, was this just a normal thing that went on, or was this kind of gearing up towards the Iran stuff, or was it just a SAS kind of mixing up training session?
Red Sails was actually, that started happening before Iran, and it came down through channels. The British wanted to test their own system, and they asked for Americans to assist. And Detachment A, because of its training and its skill set, got selected by the headquarters down in Stuttgart, the Special Operations Task Force. And they said, we want you guys to do this. So we were sending teams over there. It was basically to go into England and mimic an Irish Republican Army terrorist cell, not to be Irish, but to mimic a terrorist cell, and try to hit targets with MI5 and MI6 looking for us. Initially, it started out as a pretty canned exercise because the Brits would tell us where to stay, where to get our rental cars, and things like that. And very quickly, we figured out this is not a fair game. So we started to game it and would dump our cars, dump our hotels, and go elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, how better do you learn how to fight terrorists than to actually become one? And that's basically what we were doing in Berlin. Is we were expecting the Russians and the East Germans were going to be looking for us. So we had to figure out the best way to act, and the best way to act was the same way they did it during World War II, the same way the mafia does it. You know, to go underground and to fight from the sewers, basically. So that's what the Brits were looking for, and that was a really good exercise. And I think we did 4 or 5 of those. So.
And that one, I think I may have misread, but I thought they said that y'all did so well that they were actually trying to talk the Army into letting y'all go into Northern Ireland, or a few guys.
Yeah.
Woo.
I think if you read up on the history of Northern Ireland, you would see that the British were using some unusual methods in Northern Ireland, the Special Air Service, and then what they called the 14th Intelligence Company. That was about the same time. And so they were looking for people to go in there and help them with it. That's a true story.
Wow.
And actually, I wrote a novel about it.
Oh, man. Guys, this book is just full of interesting sidebar history that in the overall scheme of things is just huge like this, that is just amazing. As you're kind of getting into late 70s here, y'all are doing I'm not going to go into all of it, but I mean the training is absolutely nonstop. Y'all are doing training SWAT teams. You're working with the pre-Delta blue light guys who would kind of get a little shafted. Some would end up going to Delta. You're training with SAS. You become USACOM certified. That's when I believe Beckwith and the guys showed up, pulling security work, PSD work for General Haig. So a bunch of stuff is going on in this book, even before the call up for the mission. When do y'all find out finally that Delta or the mission's going to happen and Delta does need help? Or I should say the Special Operation Force needs help, not Delta.
Because I can't mention that word anyway.
Yeah.
You will one quick aside. You will notice in the book Mission Iran that Charlie Beckwith's book is not in there in my bibliography. It was in the bibliography, and after it went to the Pentagon, it came out, and I have no clue why, but whatever.
Wow.
I remember the day the news about the embassy came out when it was taken. The first thing we did, we had a unit meeting, and the colonel came down and basically said, don't go anywhere. I expect something to happen. And the first thing we heard was that the first of the 509th Airborne down in Vicenza, Italy, had been put on alert. And we said, okay, they're going to go into Iran with the airborne unit and do something. But they got taken off that alert status almost immediately.
Wow.
And then the colonel came back, I think it was the next day, or the sergeant major, and he said, "Okay, we're on standby. We don't know what exactly is happening, but don't go anyplace, no leaves, things like that." And that would get adjusted as time would go on. But the colonel and the sergeant major went back to Washington for several meetings, and almost immediately they identified the need to send people into the city to get intelligence. So several of our people were selected for that. And then they came back and said, "Okay, we have a second mission." And the second mission was to take down the foreign ministry, because there were actually two targets in Tehran. There was the embassy compound, which was a fairly, no, it was a large compound. It was like 23 buildings on a number of acres. I can't remember the exact data.
It's huge.
And Charlie quite rightly said, "We're going to need a lot of people for this." And they were initially told they could use maybe 50. But that got quickly kicked up to about 90 people. So 90 Delta operators were going to go in. Our target was significantly smaller, and we had a fewer number of people to bring out. Whereas it was only about 50 hostages by the time Eagle Claw went down, but there were 3 Americans that were being held at the foreign ministry, and that was our target. So our participation in Eagle Claw was a total of 13 people.
Wow. Can you kind of mention a little bit about the DET A's target? Well, actually, before we even get into the target, I don't want to give away a lot of this, because it's probably my favorite portion of the book. But could you speak a little bit about Clem and Scotty? You don't have to get into a lot, like I said, not ruin the story for everybody. But you kind of cover about what the cojones on these men and what they were doing.
Well, yeah, it's actually pretty simple. I think if you're going to pull up a military operation inside a denied area, which Tehran was, you have to have good information. And the CIA said they had no capabilities to collect the kind of information we needed. The State Department at that time did not have extremely good records on the construction of the embassy. How it was laid out, what the buildings were, and things like that. That's something that came out of the raid, as they do that now. But you also just can't send somebody in there and ask them to collect the information that they might not be trained to do. So the best option was to have some special forces operators that were capable of operating undercover and to send them in. And Clem and Scotty were the 2 that were chosen from a total of 5 candidates to go in. Also, the foreign ministry, we had no information on the foreign ministry. Obviously, you might have an overhead satellite photo, but that doesn't tell you how the building is laid out or anything like that. And that's basically, that's the front of it right there. So Clem and Scotty were chosen because they were of foreign birth. They could handle themselves because of their training, and they were capable of being covered with another country's passports, which were obtained with the help of some friendly intelligence agencies from other countries. So that's basically it. They were covered as businessmen. Both of them had completely separate identities and separate covers, and they went in separately into Tehran, and actually were able to meet several times and coordinate things, but they spent a lot of time in there preparing things. They had to locate the buildings, the targets. They had to get as much information on those as possible, how they were being guarded, security forces, and they had to figure out how to get from the second helicopter site, which was outside the city, into the city. They also had to do the logistics portion of it. The CIA officer had gone in and acquired the necessary equipment and location to store it, and then turned it over to our guys and left the country. So they had access to vehicles and storage sites and things like that. So they spent all their time in there acting as businessmen, doing what businessmen do, and they do cover meetings and things like that to explain their presence. And then at the same time, they were getting the information necessary to pull off the mission. And so when they finished that, they came back to the United States through a circuitous route and were debriefed for the mission. That's when Dick Meadows and Fred Aruggi joined them. And just before the mission went off, they went back into the city. So once they got into the city, then Clem and Scotty had to show Dick and Fred what was happening, and they had to bring them up to speed. And so on the night of Eagle Claw, they were waiting inside Iran.
And I'm not going to give it away, but when it starts going bad, it is quite the harrowing tale of Mr. Fred and for that fact, Mr. Dick Meadows and them, what they've got to do and all of that. Their E&E situation quite intriguing to say the least. Geez Louise. So with them doing, and I mean they're getting a lot of great intel. They had some close calls. We're not going to ruin that. I think people need to read that and really get in to see how good Mr. Clem and Scotty were, because you wouldn't think it, although you cleared this up. Mr. Dick Meadows was used to SOG, direct action. He wasn't a spy by any means and didn't have the DET A tradecraft work like y'all. And he almost, they almost got into a situation there.
Well, Dick, he had to learn. It was OJT training for him and Fred too. I mean, Fred was native Farsi speaker, so he could deal with that. But still, they're put into a situation that they're not quite used to.
And that just makes the Dick Meadows legend even more. So seeing how they got out of that and then exfilling and finally, getting to where they're going. When, as you mentioned, the Clem and Scotty debrief, the Army and you guys are getting intel and solid intel. As you mentioned, the CIA really blew whatever they had going and really didn't have any intel on the ground. From what they get you guys, does that really narrow down and key in on the training that y'all are going to go to, and y'all hone in on the storming, the blending in, as you said, looking like a civilian? Did it really hone the training in, since y'all had good intel now?
It gave everyone an idea of what to expect, how to handle it. The guys that were going in for Eagle Claw were only going to spend one night on the ground, and they were going to be in direct action mode. So not like they had to blend in too much, except for the ride from the helicopter landing zone into the city. They were going to be in civilian vehicles, but everybody's dressed in
kitted up,
civilian clothes, but almost identically. They're wearing M65 field jackets that have been dyed black and they're wearing all black jeans. And so you see a truckload of these guys, and you know you've got a problem.
Oh yeah. It's like, oh no, who are these bad looking dudes jumping out with civilian attire and jet black dyed pants and everything? No good, no good. um when everything starts to really ramp up, that's Mr. Clem. General Vaught, I believe, does he finally stand up in front of all of y'all? Is this where y'all know in front of the whole JTF? I assume that's you and the SOF portion. April 23rd, 1980, and President Carter and everybody gives the go ahead, and that's how y'all first know it's on.
Yeah, that was for the
Eagle
120, 140 some people that are now advanced stationed on that island just off the coast of Oman. So they are ready to go and just waiting for the word. And that's when General Law gets up and says, we're about to go.
Wow. I can't imagine the feeling y'all that everybody in that room got. Not only General Vaught himself, I'm sure, but especially all the guys that have been training, getting ready to go out and do this. And especially getting hostages back. I'm sure it must have been like the guys that going on the Sante raid must have felt. Like,
well, that's exactly. Yeah. I think that's exactly what everybody was thinking. This is the next. This is the next Sante, or at least they were hoping it would be. Oh.
Yeah. Oh man, and it's interesting because everyone gets the go, and there's is it Operation Reforger? No, FTX Reforger and Flintlock are about to start happening, and of course, DET A participates in it. And you've got the odd number teams and the even number teams, and that y'all are trying to make sure you have good NCOs. I believe Colonel Ochovic.
Colonel Olshevic is the commander. He was going to lead the team in. Yeah, the rest of the unit had to play like everything was just normal. So we were back in the city. The 80-some people that were not forward for this mission, we continued on training as normal because we were in Europe. The Russians and the East Germans tried to watch what was going on. So everybody said, well, you have to act like everything's normal. So that's what we were doing. I was down in West Germany on the FTX, on the Reforger exercise, or FTX Flintlock, when this happened. And it was the morning of 25th of April that I was in a guest house in southern Germany, and the owner of the guest house came into the breakfast room and dropped the newspapers on the table and said, big news here, and it's all in German. And I saw it from across the room, and I'm going, oh God. And basically it said in German, the mission has failed. So that was a bad day. Bad day for the guys down there, much more so, but also for us, because we've been waiting for something.
I mean, I can only imagine you guys back there seeing that news. Guys are, and much like all of you guys, when you're not initially assigned to a mission, you've got DET A guys begging to be a part of this and get on. And that just shows another the heart of you men. Just for all intents and purposes, this could have been a suicide mission, and you've got guys that have done their part, didn't need to be doing any more dangerous stuff like this. Several SOG vets wanting in on this operation that schedule's already set. As you said, you can't break normal routine, and when they see you gone or make that up, they're going to know something's up. So they had to continue on, and So you just said April 25th, and as we know, was it the 23rd through the 24th, the night April 23rd and the night of the 24th, where the disaster occurred?
The night of the 24th, 25th. So they knew that had happened.
Wow. Okay. And
yeah, it was the morning of the 25th that the news came out.
mhm. Okay, so wow, I mean then that's literally immediately, because I think it's mentioned April 26th, the second plan that I believe you're going to be a part of is starting to be formed, and I believe the first thing that said is no Marine Corps pilots. It's going to be Army and Air Force now. That
No
we're
Marine Corps pilots, no Navy
yeah,
helicopters.
not denigrating our good friends. My father was a Marine, not denigrating them, but this had to be done. That there were clearly some issues that went down that were too much different branches not communicating and all that. That just it didn't gel. So that was right off the bat initial. I found that very interesting that they weren't wasting any time in making sure if this was going to go down, it was going to have a good chance of working. What was that like when y'all finally, when you figure out that we're going to try and go back? Excited, kind of stressed.
I'm trying to think back, and it's basically you have lost a football game, and suddenly you're told that you have a rematch. So this time it's going to be for real. And I think that's how the military looked at it too, because the force mix changed quite a bit. The Delta element grew by about 50%. We went from about our 13 guys, we went to 40 for our portion. Now there was no restrictions on the number of helicopters. They were going to be employing C-5A Galaxies and 141s to get people in. The Rangers were going to do an airfield seizure. It went from rescue mission to almost retribution. So,
I think my favorite part of leading into this, I believe, is it called Honey Badger now, and it says violence of action as opposed to rest. I mean, it's a rescue, of course, but this is going to be violence of action.
Yeah, it was not going to be a quiet injury. We would also have a wing of AC-130 gunships that were going to go in and prep the target. So.
Wow, and it's. I mean, this is happening quick, and you had mentioned the what was it? Oh, the MFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Operation Storm Cloud. I've got a patch that I'm going to bring up, but finding out that it's going to be a helicopter assault. There's special training going on at Doughboy City, and then you speak about the arsenal of weapons that come out. Is this a big switch up that was from the original rescue plan? Are y'all up in the armory here, so to speak?
Pretty much, yeah. The guys that went in the first time were carrying some machine guns and pistols, and that was about it. We switched up, and we were carrying everything from medium machine guns to laws, everything. So
Claymores.
it was open game.
Yeah. I mean, when I started seeing that right there at the beginning, the effects of them learning pretty quickly what went wrong on the first one and letting y'all have quite the arsenal, more helicopters and all of that, I was like, good Lord, they're not messing around on this one. This is a very interesting patch. Would you care to speak a little bit about that? The Empire Striking Back.
Well, that was about the same time the Star Wars movie came out. So we adopted that as our unit memorial crest.
Yeah.
We actually had T-shirts with the Empire Strikes Back painted on it, and that that was the only identification that we had on us.
That
And so when
is
this patch was made at the conclusion of everything, that's how it all came together. And obviously, that's a representation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs there. So
we got the stiletto going through it. That's a really cool patch. If somebody had one on one of those many Facebook collector groups, and I was trying to find out if it was real or just his own little recreation. He never got back to me, but that is I'm a big SOG patch man, and that's one of the cooler patches I've seen. Um, do you know who may have designed that? Did all of y'all get together, or did somebody show up one day with everything made?
some guy that might be in the same room as I am came up with the
Oh,
idea and made it. So I think there were a total of 100 patches made, and they were passed out to the unit.
that is too cool, sir. That is too cool. Wow. Oh man. Uh, and so what? And then with Empire Strikes Back, one last little keynote as we're starting to get towards what's going to happen here. I believe, did y'all say that y'all had the intention to carry a 5x7 American flag and put it up the MFA flagpole?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that flag it still exists. Probably going to go to the museum someday. But anyway,
That's amazing.
we borrowed that flag from the Berlin Brigade headquarters. So the Berlin Brigade headquarters had a street that led up to the front of it, and buildings on either side, and then the front and a big flagpole. And they had three different flags to fly. One was a little storm flag. It was about 3x2, for high winds and stuff. And then they had the ceremonial flag, which was about 20 by 30, which was huge. And then they had the medium flag, which was like 5x7. And so we liberated that flag, and we were planning on bringing it along.
That
So I went through all
is
the training and stuff inside a rucksack.
wow. Yeah, that definitely needs to be put in a museum with the history behind that and it being with y'all the entire time. That's got to be in a museum at some point in time. That's historical. Wow. Glad I remembered to ask that. And you kind of mentioned, you know, as we're getting towards the end, and guys, we'll get to y'all's questions because you've got some good ones before we close out here. You kind of mentioned the resurgence, shall we say, of the loach or little bird, as they're now known amongst the 160th and all of that, and them all but being basically eliminated after Vietnam and sent to National Guard units and such. And I believe y'all actually get y'all's from a group in Oklahoma, if I remember reading that correctly.
Yeah, I think the book has a picture of one of them, and you can see marked on it that says National Guard. They had planned on dumping all of them and not using the helicopter anymore. And when the mission came down, a select group of pilots out of the 101st Airborne, which was now Air Mobile, and had most of the really shit out pilots.
Oh yeah.
Those pilots were chosen to fly this mission. So there were going to be Army pilots flying UH-60s, which was going to be Deltasbergs. But there were also going to be 47s and 53s. But then for our portion of the mission, they loaded us up with OH-6s. All the pilots came out of the 101st, and the group of pilots, or the this new provisional outfit was called Task Force 158 for the mission. That name would eventually roll over, and then they would be called Task Force 160. That was a couple of years ago. Later, when they went into Grenada, and then they would become what they are now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Night Stalkers.
Yeah, the
but
bad boys.
Unbelievable pilots. They could fly backwards.
Oh yeah, I mean and there's some videos that have gotten out of some of the guys in Iraq, Afghanistan, and such, and actually and some SEAL missions on vehicle vessel boarding and such. And my God Almighty, those boys can put those birds in some pretty particular places, and I mean, like it's an extension of their body almost. And then it kind of gets into there at the end. Y'all are kind of doing some final practice. Y'all hit where y'all need to identify from the air. And y'all, I don't know if y'all didn't have anything, but there's always the cheap and reliable method of duct tape to be able to put it on helmets and such, or car tops or whatever, to be properly identified. I thought that was pretty cool. Delta getting the Blackhawks, as you said. And what exactly was the Jesus bolt?
The Jesus bolt is sort of it doesn't really exist, but on the top of a helicopter, you've got the hub with the rotors. And so what they call the Jesus bolt is the final assembly that holds the rotors onto the top of the helicopter. And when we were loading these helicopters on the aircraft, the rotors are full. And then they had to be opened. These guys had to be able to get their helicopter off the airplane and mission ready within, I think, 6 minutes. And so they fold the rotors back out and ensure that they are secured. And our thing was always, we would ask the crew chief, did you tighten the Jesus bolt? So.
That's a really really good part of the book. I saw that, and I was like, I gotta ask him to figure out what exactly the Jesus bolt is. That's
because when the blades fly off, you go, oh Jesus.
oh yeah. Oh, gosh, I'd hate to even think about being on a bird when the top came off like that. Y'all, the final practice, shall we say, all live fires going on. I believe y'all were at Camp Rudder near Eglin, near the Florida Ranger Phase course.
Yeah, our helicopters are flying out of Hurlburt Airfield, which is part of Eglin. Now it's a separate air base, but our target was Camp Rudder because they had some barracks there that were very similar or approximated the Fort Ministry. Three-story tall buildings with entries and stuff. So that's where we were practicing the actual mission. And so we would land in the helicopters right in front of them.
Wow, that is, what was that kind of that like? I mean, y'all are ramped up. You've got all the new equipment. Everything's looking serious as can be. Y'all get the November 23 through 24. The full scale exercise goes down. What goes on there to kind of close out that little history before we hit the questions? What happens?
Well, a couple things happened. One thing happened was that a journalist by the name of Jack Anderson had stumbled across a story and said on national news something about a second attempt. So that was one thing. The other thing is speculation, but there has been some speculation that the Reagan administration, before it was elected in, had made contact with the Iranians and said, if you release the hostages, we'll help you get spare parts for your F4 Phantoms. I think maybe F-14s too.
F4.
That's speculation. But shortly after the election, and after we had done our rehearsals and stuff like that, General Locke came by and said, "We're shutting down. We might bring it back up, but we don't think so." And so we went home. And then on the 5th of January, 5 minutes after Reagan was sworn in, it was announced that the hostages were released, which is, probably not a bad thing, but anyway, we were disappointed, naturally.
And as I forgot the man's name, you'll help us out here, but he said it would
J.J. Morrison.
It would have been glorious.
Yeah. A direct quote from a Star Trek movie.
Wonderful. It would have been glorious. I mean, it's great because you never know what would have happened. I mean, sadly, some guys may have died, some hostages may have died. I know you guys wanted to get in there and show what y'all are made of and get the fellow Americans back, but they came back safe and sound, thank goodness. And yeah, I've always heard that rumor. That's been a long-standing kerfuffle about Reagan and getting the hostages out, kind of backhanded to make Jimmy Carter look bad and all that. But that's hearsay rumor, so we can't judge anything off that. But I was going to see now we've got a few good questions here. We're about 4 minutes away from the hour mark, and we won't keep you too long. But I figured if it was all right, we'd hit these questions real quick.
Sure.
Okie dokie.
If I can answer them.
Let's see. Jason. No. Operation Gladio. That was much later in Europe, wasn't it? Or was that earlier before your time?
Operation Gladio was almost from the middle of the 1950s up until into the 1980s. And actually, Operation Gladio speaks to a specific part of that, which was in Italy. And it was basically NATO intelligence agencies working together to establish stay-behind networks, to train civilians and former military, to give them weapons to cache underground and to be ready in case of a Warsaw-backed invasion. Operation Gladio was specifically Italy, but there were operations going in Greece, in Belgium, in Holland, in France, and even in West Germany. Not in Berlin, per se. So they were doing, intelligence people were training these guys to work like the OSS did, or the resistance forces in World War II. But the difference would be that these people were armed and ready before the war instead of having to figure it out after the war started. So,
wow. Okay, man, that's I'll have to do a little more looking into Gladio. That's very interesting. Jason is curious. Could you give a hypothetical rundown on what would have happened if it all hit the fan while you were over there, both in your individual duties and the unit as a whole?
Well, hypothetical was basically what we were going on the entire time we were there. We were preparing for World War III. What would have happened? It's hard to say, but we were banking on having at least a minimum amount of notice to get away from our headquarters. We had a building in Berlin. I'm assuming he's talking about World War III in Berlin, but we had a headquarters in Berlin, which is where we congregated, did our planning and things like that. But we knew or suspected that the Russians and the East Germans would probably go after all those key sites immediately when war began. Not just us, but against the American headquarters against the British, but against the French. So our plan was to get away from our headquarters as fast as possible. And we planned for that. We had equipment and uniforms and places we could go planned out, so that if the balloon went up, we would disappear into the city and be prepared to carry on a mission. How that would have gone, again, the Russians, or actually the East Germans, had the responsibility to go into West Berlin. So they would have sent several thousand troops into Berlin to control everything, or try to control everything. They would have to, of course, fight 25,000 NATO troops, but when you look at what was around Berlin, it would have been very interesting, because there were probably over 1 million Warsaw Pact troops surrounding in East Germany. Most of them would have been moving west toward the border, but a lot of them was trying to come into the city and control it. And our mission was basically, do your best to slow the Russian advance down. And since Berlin was sort of a focal point for the railways and things, our mission was to slow those troops down. So we might not get the first group, but we could try to slow them down from reinforcing them. And that was it. We were there to give the NATO forces 24 to 72 hours of breathing room.
And I mean, I can't remember if you mentioned this in the book, Mission Iran, or in the history of the DET. Did y'all have a set time? You mentioned to try and get them 36, 72 hours, what have you. Did y'all have a set time to where y'all were going to stay in the fight? Or were y'all going to stay and fight until you died? Or was it a set time, hey, y'all done enough, let's try and E and get to a friendly country or what have you?
I think each team might have had its own plan, but our plan was basically do what you can until you can't do anymore. And whether or not that meant, you didn't have the resources and you had to E or lie low, or whether or not you got wiped off the map, was hard to say.
Gosh almighty, that's the whole respect of DET A, is y'all going in there knowing the mission and doing that, holding off the entire horde army of Russians coming in there and trying to buy as much time as y'all can. That is just insane. Absolutely.
Well, I think it was sort of like sticking your finger in the dike and hoping the rest of it wouldn't blow up. So
that's the absolute perfect analogy for that. Jason was curious about any spies or moles. We know about MACV-SOG being just eaten up with it. Did DET A have any problems with leakage or moles or infiltrators?
Not within the unit. I doubt that there would ever have been, because of the caliber of the people there. There was one guy during the Vietnam War who was in the unit. He was a medic. It came down on orders for Vietnam and decided he didn't want to go there, and so he went to Sweden and stayed in Sweden. That's the only one I know about. But we did have to be careful about our personal relationships, and even our relationships with the German officials, because the German police, the German government was, if not heavily infiltrated, it was kind of porous, as far as permeable, I guess is the better word. The East Germans had pretty good sources, so we had to be careful with everybody we dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, y'all had 3 different, covers y'all were doing. Y'all are blending in from regular army, blending in the civilian world as DET A men, and I forgot what the other one was.
Well, the third one was basically going completely underground.
Oh, yes, sir, and completely disappearing and being non-findable
I will
jump.
say that I got access to the East German Security Service records when I was researching the book.
Ooh.
And I asked specifically for them to come up with any information that they had, either on DET A, the first unit, or PSSE. And they had a few tidbits. They knew that we were on Andrews Barracks, and they had a couple of names, one of which was almost correct, and the rest of the names were not. But as far as where we lived, who we were, what we were doing, they didn't have anything.
Wow, that's a testament to y'all's work and that tradecraft training that y'all got in blending in. That's amazing. Jeez Louise. Jake's curious. Did you ever run into a man named Steve Bennett? He worked in Laos with Project 404 and flew Covey with out of NKP. Just his grandson's just curious if that name rings a bell.
No, if he was an aviator, probably not.
Okay. We'll keep trying, Jake. We're trying to find out some information for him on his grandfather. Jason was curious. You mentioned the M79 earlier. Did y'all chop those down or keep them stock length?
We kept them in stock. We did not use them that often to justify cutting them down. We did have some Remington 870s, though, that were cut down to about this size.
That you could keep in your overcoat and just whip out.
Yeah.
Wow. Was there any use of tear gas, CS, or anything of the sort in DET A's arsenal?
No. I mean, we could access it, but we didn't really have any use for it. Smoke, yes. A lot of smoke, especially, what's it called? HC, high concentrate, the white smoke. We used a lot of that for screening.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. Did y'all have, like, at that point in time, in y'all's, shall we say, radio rooms or whatever, did y'all have anything to destroy stuff, like a white phosphorus grenade like you see in Vietnam, or did y'all just smash stuff in the event something went wrong and you need to dispose of equipment or anything? Or
Thermite.
Thermite.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Thermite will that'll definitely do the deed. Jason, I'd imagine with the type of men that was involved with DET A, it was hard to keep a lid on the aggressiveness and wanting to fight. How did y'all blow off steam and avoid incidences?
We didn't avoid incidents. We had a number of them. There were a few fights between people in the unit. I mean, there were always personalities that get around. And we had a number of incidents downtown with Germans and MPs and guys from the engineer battalion. So generally it was, what's the word? Shoot and scoot. If you're going to get in trouble, at least don't be on the X when the MPs show up.
There you go. There you go. It's what's the saying? It's always better to ask forgiveness later, or what is it? Something to that effect. You know, do the deed and just beg for forgiveness later. Al Savota, contingencies of possible war aside, were you tasked with any disinformation missions? Any small skirmishes with no major escalations?
No, we were not in the disinformation business. That would have been psychological operations, folks, and the agency. And then you have radio in the American sector also, or radio free Europe. So that was going on. Small skirmishes with no major escalations, a couple. We had, I can say that we never shot back at the East Germans when they shot at us. But no real consequences. And our sergeant majors were pretty good about saying it couldn't possibly have been us. So anyway,
that's great. Couldn't possibly have been my boys. Oh, Josh has about somebody. Did you serve with a Ed Trout that was at DET A?
Yeah, he was there when I arrived. He left shortly after that, about a year after I got there. Yeah, he was a good man. He was a team sergeant. Yeah, wow. He was. Unfortunately, he was killed about a year ago.
Oh man,
down in Texas, I think, and they still haven't figured out what happened.
I hate to hear that. Gosh. Oh, Mr. Dick Moosegrove's son Scott has joined us. He said he's got his dad's flintlock shirt from 1976 also.
Dick Gross was my team sergeant when I first got there.
Oh, wow.
No. Dick Gross was on my team, I should say, when I was at Fort Devens.
Okay.
Dick Gross was he was on another adjacent team in Berlin.
Another SOG vet that went to the DET.
And if I remember right, he wore a back brace all the time because he'd done over 400 jumps, and his back was suffering.
And he and Mr. Howard Sugar, completed one of the combat Halo and SOG. That's a heck of a story. Thanks for joining us today, Scott. You always glad when you're. Oh, Scott had another question about. Did you think the Stasi was a worthy enemy? Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were worthy. I think they were very good at foreign intelligence collection. And they were also a formidable internal security organization inside Germany, inside East Germany. Yes, and he well deserved that retirement. That one they should talk about, but they gross. They also had a military component, which was probably comparable to our Rangers, and it was not very big. But as far as special operations people, they did not have that many, and I do not think they had that much experience. But yeah, that sign came off the MFS headquarters inside Berlin. Shortly after the wall went down, it got picked up and removed to my apartment.
Wow, that is wow. Since we're actually talking about items, this Jason had this that I didn't know. So just then, do you have any more items or items that have sentimental value from DET A times?
Well,
that's yeah.
3 or 4 coins. This guy is one of my, let's see, favorites.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Logan Dagger Man.
That is too cool.
So that's from a carver in southern Germany.
Are your berets right there? Is one of those the DET flash, the 39?
No, the DET actually did not have an official flash. The green flash there is 10 Special Forces.
Oh.
And then this one is for Army Special Operations Command.
Ah, okay.
So this is what you wear when you're with one of the weird units.
Wow, that's great.
That helmet also is sentimental too, but it's not an American. It's a Fallschirmjäger.
Oh wow, that is really, really cool. Yeah, I can't imagine some of the interesting stuff that you've got. Great name. Well, Walter Shoemate, can you ask Mr. James if his Masters of Mayhem book will be coming out on Audible?
Is that the Walt Shoemate that sometimes does silly stuff around the world?
Yeah, that's he's using the name, but that would be the same famous Walt that did all kinds of amazing things all over the world.
Well, Walt, I'm happy to talk to you. I think that's a good idea. I won't comment on that.
Yeah.
I believe it is out on Audible. If not, I will check. All the other books have been put out on Audible, and Mission Iran is now out on Audible. So I'm pretty sure it is out.
Excellent. Okay. I think I've got. I'll look and see here in just a second and verify. I think it might actually already be on there as well, because I'm looking at your site and I
You
think
check
it's.
on Amazon.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Let's see right here.
Mr. Wald is asking about Masters of Mayhem.
No, right now it is only on Kindle from there.
Oh yeah.
Hardcover and Kindle. Yeah.
I will ask Walter, and I will see if they can put it on.
Oh wow.
So 303 Enfield, Mark 7, usually used in the machine guns on top of the Lawrence of Arabia armored cars. This came from one of Lawrence's campsites in Jordan. So,
That is too cool.
So this is one of the reasons I wrote that book.
Wow. This is interesting. I don't know if we've asked this one before. Who were the legends of the community still there when you were assigned, and any old hands from the OSS days still around Europe at that time? I don't know if you can even talk about that, to be honest.
Well, both our commander and our sergeant major at the time were old hands, Stan Olshavik and Jeff Raker. Other guys that were still around were Sidney Shacknow, who was commander of the unit about 1975, 76. He retired as the commander of Berlin, a two-star general. I mean, there were a number of guys. I remember when I first got up to 10th Special Forces in 1974. Before I went to a team, they assigned me to the S1 to help them, doing duty before. The new guys always get stuck with the
load. Yeah.
And so I helped for a while, and I was going through a lot of the records. I was just amazed about how many of the guys that we had up there, not only Vietnam veterans, but Korean War and World War II veterans. And I don't remember the names, but there were two guys still in the unit, 74, that had jumped in on D-Day with either the 101st or the 82nd.
Wow.
So,
holy cow.
Guys to work with.
I can only imagine. That's getting to be the history you must have heard or just sat around just listening to with men like that around. I mean, good Lord have mercy. We've got two more. I know you've given us a gracious amount of time today. I don't want to turn this into a 2-hour podcast. What type of equipment, such as special equipment, such as Starlight, NVGs, silence weapons, was DET A using? Some of that's
a lot of our weapons were specialized. I mean, the majority of our weapons were German. I mean, we used the P1, the Walther P1, which was the later derivative of the P38 from World War II. But we gave those up pretty quickly because they were garbage. Yeah, that's a good picture. That's the AMPVS-5, and those were given to the unit. That was before before the Army had even started issuing those. And I think if you read Keith Nightingale's story about preparation for Eagle Claw, he talks about how they had to pull those from a depot. They weren't even issued yet, and got them out to the units. So that's one of the sets. So that's like before they even came out. We did have a couple of the Starlight scopes, but we didn't use them a great deal. Our primary sniper weapons was the 40XB, the Winchester, I think, and the M21 system. The 40XB had a suppressor for it. That is a very special weapon. That's called the Well Rod, which was a weapon designed by the Special Operations Executive in World War II, British 9mm, and that weapon can truly be called a suppressed, not a suppressed weapon, but a silent weapon, because you could actually pull the trigger and hear the hammer hit the primer, and then the next thing would be the gas slowly escaping. You could hear the round hit the target. Something that you can't do with most suppressed weapons will just give you a pop or something like that. This was silent.
That is amazing.
A high standard HDM/S, high standard heavy duty military /suppressed. The Walther's MPK submachine gun. That's a Walther MB5. No, that's a Walther P5. Good pistol.
Oh yeah. My dad had one, or a Walther PPK, I think, after the James Bond silver one. I love that pistol. Don't know what happened to it.
It was a short submachine gun, similar to what the West German police were using. They were using the Walther MBL, which is slightly longer. The MPK was a compact submachine gun.
You'll have to help me out and Scott out. He was mentioning he's got some pretty neat memorabilia. He says he has the DRR flag from the Russian embassy gifted to him from Linky. He doesn't know if he's spelling that name, and he said if you could ask him about Linky or Lemke.
Lemke, Lemke, Clem.
Clem. Oh, Clem. Okay.
That's the Mad German.
Yeah. Okay. Scott knows the Mad German then. Wow. Was he around the entire time you were in the DET as well? Did y'all serve your entire time together?
Yeah. We were there. And I also served with him later when I was working with that other government agency.
Is he an old guy or not old guy? That's rude.
He's older than me.
Okay. So he is kind of old guy. Some of the Josh on the prior podcast, we've talked about some of those. I'm not wanting to keep Mr. Jim on for too long. He's gracious enough. We'll have him back and we'll cover some of that. Everyone's saying thank you for joining us, and would sit here and listen to you all day, but we've almost coming up on an hour and a half, and we're planning for an hour. Is there anything we didn't cover or you would like to say before we close out for today?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot we didn't cover, but yeah.
I like to give people.
Iran is the follow-on book about Iran. This is the other one that you might be interested if you're. This is a fictional version of the Iran mission called Appointment in Tehran. If you look on Amazon, I'm somewhere in there. I think I got about 3 reviews on Amazon. But anyway, no, I just enjoy talking to you guys, and I'd be happy to come back.
That's what I was going to say.
For us to talk about.
Yeah, I was going to say I didn't want to give too much of the book away, considering a lot of people may not have gotten to it yet. I have shared a link before we did this once I found out you were going to be coming on. So maybe we give it a few weeks or so and let people get some read time in, because there were a few questions about any experiences with the West Germans and other stuff like that you have spoken a little bit about. But maybe we can have you back and talk about some stuff in the book that once they've read it.
Sure. Yeah. Collect questions and see what happens.
I'll do that. Jason, we need to do a special DET A post and start getting some questions together for Mr. James to join us again. But
I want to thank everybody for listening and asking their questions too.
Absolutely, and I hope you guys please go out there or go into the show notes. Please order his book but all of his books, but specifically if you're trying to talk about DET A and be ready for the next show and all of that, get his history of DET A Special Forces in Berlin and the Mission Iran book. It's outstanding. You got to get it. So yeah, we'll close out for today. We'll start getting some questions together, and maybe here in a week or two we can have you back on and do a little deep dive.
Sure, sounds good.
All righty. Have a good day, sir.
Take care, bud. Take care, everyone.
All righty. Y'all have a good day, and we'll see y'all tomorrow. We've got a show tomorrow as well. So see y'all later.